option. The legislation provides very comprehensive consumer protection, and that's a hugely important point. We note that it's world-leading stuff, and I spent a lot of time talking to Australians and the Brits, Asian countries, about what we've done for retirement villages and how they could cut and paste our legislation and make it work better for them. One of the key things in a buoyant housing market we've appreciated is releasing equity. So residents deciding to move to a village are able to sell their home and purchase an occupation right agreement in a retirement village, and often have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars left over. If you're in Auckland and you've sold your home in Epsom for $1.8 million, you've purchased a unit in a retirement village for $950,000, that's $800,000 or more you've put straight into the bank. For many older people who have never had a lot of money, that is a bit like winning lotto. And all of a sudden, their quality of life dramatically improved. Residents, we know, have an improved sense of companionship and physical activity, and is committed to improving the regime. So looking at a few pictures, this is the Lockley Resorts Assisted Care Apartment Development. As you can see, it's a two-storey development. Lockley, again, in the lower left-hand picture there, the high quality of fittings and specifications each unit has. Terrace view, their entranceway, and terrace view streets under construction, and the street bit is an important part of what we're going to talk about, so we'll come to that again in just a moment. So looking at our submission now, particularly on the rates. I wrote this last year and wrote it to the Mayor and asked whether this could be considered, and the answer I should actually make a submission to you now, this particular development, so here we are doing that. So the numbers are a little out of date, but they were accurate when I wrote this, I think, last July. So the first about what we're going to talk about is that all villages and all residents pay a weekly fee. A capital sum to move into the village, and that capital sum, as I said, might be $100, whatever it might be, whatever the amenities and the market suggests. But having moved in, each resident a weekly fee. And the national average is about $141. I'm not sure what it is here in Ashburton, but it's aimed at those 6 points there. Upkeep of the facility, common area, maintenance of the ground, staff salaries and wages, statutory charges such as rates and water, security insurance and general services such as the village van. Now, it's perfectly true that residents who only have national super on are now able to claim the rates rebate from the government, but nonetheless, which form part of the village overheads paid by the residents as part of their fee. Now, a number of villages fix the weekly fee, so in a sense that's a little academic so far as residents are concerned, but still around at least half our villages increase weekly fees in line with the increase in costs are. So residents are faced with increased costs, and of course if you have a fixed income, then like any other older person, then making sure costs don't escalate out of control is a very real issue for our residents. So here in Ashburton, the weekly fees are those, and you guys know this far better the detail than I do. Anyway, they all are the weekly residential Ashburton. And for residents, we pay the Ashburton Wastewater Serviceable and an air quality charge. And I guess the point about this one is that when you look at and sum the average of the rates, it's true that the rate per village unit is slightly less than a comparable dwelling city, and that's it's very fine. But we believe that there are significant differences between villages and the community, and the houses in the community, I mean, and we would suggest that if you look at the detail of what use is made of council amenities, we believe a more outcome so far as rates could be possible. There was a report done a few years ago which looks at the housing stock and how retirement villages compare with overall housing stock and our to that particular report done by a company called Cracer, I think about 5 years ago, but it's no less valid, I believe, still 5 years on. And in that, the report argues the retirement village units are quite substantially different to conventional dwellings, and they argued that start looking at the number of bedrooms, for example, you can see retirement village units are aimed basically at maybe single people or maybe a couple, but without a big family, obviously. 32% of our villages are one bedroom, a bedsit or a studio, compared with just 5.5 housing stock in the wider community. 59% of our units are bedrooms, compared with 19% in the wider community, and just 9.3 of our village units have 3 or more bedrooms, compared with 76% in the wider community. So the important thing, I guess, about this one is that already we're looking about developments which have a smaller footprint for a smaller number of people per dwelling and make a lesser impact on council amenities. And the ratio of people per unit in Ashburton is 1.9 people per unit, compared with 2.5 in the district in a conventional dwelling, and in many larger places that's probably closer to 2.6 people per dwelling. Another point of difference lies in traffic. We did some research, members, about the number of cars, number of trips which residents made. We looked at a wider New Zealand picture to see if we can get some statistics, and we found that retirement village residents basically about half a car per dwelling, so obviously one car between two dwellings, obviously, and make 3 per day in the village and 2 trips per day aged care facilities, and probably more in terms of the aged care, more staff trips rather than resident trips. But that's what the research shows. And again, I said that compares quite strongly with conventional dwellings, which have 2 vehicles per household and make up to 9 trips per day. Roading is also important, and again, in villages, all roading, pavements, underground services, curbs, channeling, and so forth are provided, and the upkeep of which is maintained by the residents' weekly fees. And Lockley, for example, has some 800 metres of private roading, which I would suggest cost the council a cent to maintain. Terrace View also has a growing network, and you can see the little there which shows the extent of the private network which Lockley has. There's a picture of the roading and the channeling and the footpaths, just in case you thought I shouldn't need to show you that. We also make the point that villages provide their own amenities, which means that residents actually don't have to go out of the village to access facilities in the wider community, and therefore we would suggest to you places a reduced, maybe a negligible demand on council-owned amenities. The picture on the left there is hairdressing. The top right is the village library. I should say that every village in the country has a library which is maintained by a retired librarian. I think I've not yet come across one from 6 units around the back of a church that doesn't have a library maintained by a retired librarian, and there's the swimming pool there as well. These are by no means unusual amenities in retirement villages. So I guess what we're asking for, basically what we've tried to point out in the submission is that we're to be persuaded to set a special rate for retirement villages. We would suggest to you that if you are to registered retirement villages, you would make sure that there's no policy creep. In other words, it's only a village has to be registered with the register. Villages can only ever be operated as a retirement village now and in the future. Deregistering is an incredibly complex business, and it's only happened about 4 times in my 14 years in the business. But basically what it means is that you creep by people pretending to build a retirement village, but just using it as a standard commercial development and selling it off. So if it's a registered retirement village, then you're going to be very clear it's ring fence and it's not going to go any further. We've submitted, our submission suggests what that might be. We've suggested a 0.5% for the regional and uniform annual general charge, 0.3 of the unit for roading, acknowledging that residents do make some use of the wider network, acknowledging the fact the villages have a wide network themselves. Point 5 for water, recognising that there are fewer people per unit. Point 5 of the urban amenity, basically because we suggest that this acknowledges residents make less use of council facilities, and then one equal for civil defence and government, because we all need to contribute to that. As far as development contributions, this is the second submission which we wrote a month or two back. We were submitted, and I suggest that I'm sure this is, council understands this, and this is absolutely so. But policy needs to be transparent to understand. We suggest it should be consistent. I'm not suggesting that it's not consistent, but we're just reinforcing the point. We suggest that the policy must be robust and have to protect against inappropriate allocation. And again, I've mentioned about retirement villages and the fact that they need, and that point is reinforced in those last 4 little bullet points. Demographic profiles, again, to reinforce this point, because it is germane to development contributions, the rates. I acknowledge Ryan healthcare for these 2 little compilations of pictures, but you can see the conventional residents on the left. They tend to be younger, they tend to have families, the buildings are significantly larger, use made of council amenities. The group on the right, on the other hand, tend to be older, are older, or single people are predominantly, and the developments are quite substantial in themselves, but they have a higher density of people. And some of the work which a report I handed out, gave to Richard, I think earlier, from a report we commissioned from PwC, looks in more detail at housing density. So if we were to look at the graphics between the wider community and retirement villages, if you can see that, again, 0.5 people per unit. I don't want to sort of belabor this point particularly, but I guess that the conventional dwellings appears quite sharply with retirement villages in terms of people per unit, use made of council facilities, the average age, the demographic split between male and female, and the amenities of the village. So in the development contribution point again, we return to the definition of a retirement village, making sure it's a registered retirement village under the Retirement Act, and we would suggest, because 2/3 of them have a haven, we would suggest that it can include a rest home under the Health and Disability Services Safety Act 2001. That means a village can be developed as a full continuum of care, which is, as I've said earlier, something our residents are expecting. And we would suggest to you that the definition includes other services or amenities offered on site, including nursing, medical care, welfare, and leisure amenities, accessory non-residential activities. That definition is one which councils across the country will tend to adopt. We can get a degree of consistency in a particular area. So again, development contributions, what we're asking for is that the DCs reflect villages' actual additional services based on resident characteristics. We have hold Auckland Council up as possible the leader in this area. Now, Auckland Council has a huge number of retirement villages, probably at least 90, I think, in the council area. There's around about 10,000 residents off the top of my head. So retirement village development not only is seen as a way of alleviating serious housing shortages, but also reflects the fact that residents make very limited use of council amenities. So we've suggested what Auckland Council is there as being the optimum. We've also looked at Selborne District, and they have also got a discounted contribution, as I've noted. While we like Auckland Council and would recommend that to you, Selborne is a district which has a lot of similarities, I suggest, in line with Ashburton. And my last little bit, Mr. Chair, still going okay for time, I hope?
You go for it.
Yep, okay. Just a last little bit of planning challenges for villages, and looks more at the district plan and how villages can be managed to build in. Again, this is a fairly, move along I guess, this is a reasonably standard approach which we've taken to other councils around the country, because we have operators who operate in 20 or 30 different and cities. It's very useful, a reasonably common approach to planning. So we've seen that demand for development of retirement villages is substantial, and we've looked at means. Development in some rural areas is lagging, not however Ashburton, because as you said, you're way up there when it comes to market share of retirement villages. But I guess the key point in this particular slide is that villages are very different to developments. For example, they're bigger to start with, and as a result, if you are somebody with a bare field next to you, you probably have a view on what you might want to have built there. And a retirement village development in Auckland appropriate, less so I suggest, but nonetheless, building a retirement will come with a building, obviously. We hope that compact with age-appropriate dwellings. We had noted that retirees' needs are different to younger families, and people want to age in place with a pathway to care. Regulated, I've mentioned. Key point about the long-term future of villages is that operators own and actively manage the assets and have a long-term interest in their success. The key thing about it is that the actually sold in terms of a change of ownership and tenure. People live in the village and they live there for as long as they want to, able to. When they either die or move into care, refurbishes the unit and then relicenses it. But the operator always retains ownership, therefore has a very strong interest in making sure that that village is maintained to the highest standard. A lot of competition out there, and a rundown village won't fail when it comes to a brand new village around the corner. We understand environmental issues, and a number of operators are developing Green Star development buildings. I know particularly in Auckland, which is and other urban areas, environmental issues are an important consideration for councils, and operators understand that, try and incorporate Green Star eco-design as part of their developments. And as I said at the start, desirability in and planning is very helpful. So the District Council assists the development. The key thing, I guess, is to act that villages should be a permitted residential activity. Councils, they are discretionary, which means, of course, that the neighbours who have their view on what's going to be the field next door can object to a retirement village because commercial development is not residential. However, retirement villages are demonstrably residential homes. Even an aged care facility ultimately is residential. It's home for the people living there. So yes, it's a residential activity. We would suggest the villages should be permitted in all residential areas, and sort of, if it were to be an activity, the corollary, if you like, is that villages comply with the underlying consent requirements, zoning requirements. And if they comply with that, then permitted activity. If they go above the underlying zoning requirements, then they become a notification can occur, and residents can have the right to object if they so wish. We would suggest to you that villages have different conventional residential developments, therefore need fewer restrictive built form standards. I've listed 4 there. I bring your attention to Christchurch's district plan, where we argued successfully a few years ago that retirement villages need to be so distinguished and have a range of less restrictive built form standards than those 4 part of which Christchurch adopted. And if the Ashburton District Council is keen to go on this track, then we will be happy to work with you and with your officers to develop something. The last little slide hopefully will work. It's last year we did a video of our residents, and we asked them about why they chose to live in a retirement village, what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it. And this last little clip is the last 2 of that particular video, where we've got a few residents telling us why they like living in a village, and hopefully it will work.
I can't say anything that's been, that I can see as deficient in what we have here. We've got an understanding village management, we've got staff. I can't the staff daily looking after my wife. You know, my patience is gone, theirs is just unbelievably strong.
Well, I can't find anything that I like about living in the village. And sometimes we drive past our old house and I just look at it and I have no feelings for it at all. This is home.
They're all so friendly here. It's like family.
No, honestly, my life has changed completely from coming home to a list this long of things to do to a list of what do I want to do. Do I want to play snooker? Do I want to play golf? Do I want to play bridge? Do I want to play bowls? What to do? Do I just want to sit and quietly read? I can do that now. My life's changed. It's one of the better things we've done in our life.
Right. Has anyone got any questions?
Thank you, John. Question, Councillor Mackay.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Collins, thank you very much for your submission. 3 of your written submission and information given.
This is the rate or the development contribution one?
Rates. Hang on. Rating system. You say that we note the waste collection and air quality that are not levied on standard residential rate demands. So are you indicating to me belief that there's no air quality fee for the people of residential Ashburton? That's the first question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I looked at the rates for the village, for Lockley in particular case. The rates demand a private home and compared the two, and those which appeared to appear on the village demand but not the residential demand.
Thank you, thank you. At the beginning of your you made great play that in Auckland could be an expensive house into a care facility home and have more than they perhaps ever had before at their disposal. Page 4 of the same submission, you say residents are not well-heeled group of people. Expand on that further, because in my mind, at the opening of the submission, you said they have more money cash than they've ever had. Then at the end of the conclusion, you're saying they've got less than anyone else in society. You justify both
Absolutely.
Comments, please.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I should say the amount of money people are able to, equity they're able to realise does depend quite a bit on where they're living and the balance between what the freehold home is worth and what the retirement village unit is worth. In Auckland, the extreme is greatest. It's much less so in the country. We also know that about 25% of residents only have their national super. So we've had the equity last sort of 6 or 8 years maybe, but nonetheless people in the village and can live there for 15 years or more. And if you moved in before you were able to realise the equity in your home, and all you've got is your national super, then yes, many of our residents aren't particularly well heeled. So we know that in the last rates rebate round last year, around about 13% of residents were able to claim the rates rebate. Some research which I've just seen a few days ago from Auckland University, they did a survey of residents' income, found that about 25% of residents only have national super, so that's the basis of that particular argument. But in provincial New Zealand, it's likely that the amount of equity is not as splendid as it is in Auckland, or can be in Auckland, in other main areas. That's the point.
Do you think it would, just last question, Mr. Chair,
Yes, you can.
do you think it's fair that an individual householder could set up a library in their house and ask the council for a cheaper rate? like you indicated, best homes should be able to do.
Well, I mean, I've got a library in my place. So it hasn't actually occurred to me to ask the Lower Hutt City Council, but your point is well made. In the village, the library is a foundation of several dozens of residents, personal, and we're looking at libraries with several thousands of books, a few dozen. And I think the difference is that residents know that from their own personal collection, by the collections of, several dozen other people, and that therefore the need of going to the library is reduced.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Afternoon, John. Perhaps as the councillor closest to your retirement age, I've got a couple of questions. Could you give us a copy of that submission, please? It's got a lot of information that's not perhaps in your written one, the one you just...
PowerPoint.
PowerPoint.
Yes, I think the officers have it.
And the other question is, when to Selwyn, of all the councils in New Zealand with retirement villages, the majority give rates or not? And I'd also, if you had a table, perhaps an idea what the general trend is throughout New Zealand.
That's a very good question. The councils which we know have a discount development contribution are Tauranga, Wellington, I think Christchurch, a couple of rural areas like Waipa, I think, has one. But often negotiated directly with the operator and council, and the operator doesn't necessarily always have information in the way which I would have liked to do so. Your idea was a brilliant one. I hadn't thought of that, but thank you for that. We shall go and have a talk to our experts in this area and resource management stuff and produce one for me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your submission. In your conclusion, you say, secondly, all income eligible residents receive rebate via the Rates Rebate Act. The majority cannot. Why is that so?
Because the rates rebate has an income threshold. It's round about the single person's national super, about 25 grand. It has gone up this year, I think, to 26,500 off the top of my head. But if you're a married person, then, and you both get national super, then you're going to be usually slightly outside of the threshold.
What you're saying there, by is that those who do not qualify for the rates rebate, their income is actually higher than what the rebate cut-off levels are, so they're quite well off.
Well, they don't qualify. Rebates $600, I think, a year. If you're above, let me say, it's a sliding scale. If you only have national super and you pay a lot of rates, then you're going to qualify for the top amount of rebate. If your income is slightly higher and the rates bill is lower, then it's a sliding scale, and you may only end up with a few rather than the full rebate. But the key point about it is that it is income threshold governed.
The other thing you're asking for, and this is my last question, Mr. Chair, that you're asking for a special registered retirement village. We've a lot of groups in our communities who could probably very strong argument. I think of our farming community who pay most of our rates and yet use least of that a council provide. I look at my own self. I walk to work, my car would be lucky to be used once a week. We all pay the rates. It's part of our community. Why should a retirement be treated anything differently?
I think the point is that retirement villages do provide a range of services and amenities to their residents, which if the residents lived in the council would be responsible for, and in particular I'm thinking of all the road and related infrastructure. The council amenities around playing fields and swimming pools and the like, which they are as a group significantly older, don't make use of. And while you and I, I take the train to work, still the car, we still pay the rate for the car. I think we sort of need to say that yes, a conventional government pays and can be relied upon to use the full range of services, but retirement villages, they can be distinguished because they have a specific demographic, and because that demographic meets the criteria themselves of the roads, we can distinguish that. And I appreciate that other groups may well make the point, leave it to them to do so. Council obviously to decide what to do about it, but the point I'm making is retirement villages do have a very specific demographic with very specific services which the industry, which the operator provides.
Yeah, thanks. Welcome for your submission, John. The discount, if the council did give a discount, but the owner, retirement village owns it, so that discount would go to the owner because they own it. Would, or how do other retirement villages ensure that the discount gets passed on to the residents, because that's what you're asking us to get it?
Yes.
Is there any practices in place that make that happen?
Yeah. Well, firstly, the Code of Practice for Retirement Villages requires consulted on any significant change to their contract, which includes the weekly fee. So residents will be consulted on the weekly fee, and if they know that the council has offered a discount, they would expect to see that reflected in the rate. But maybe I could ask Les or Tony whether you guys have any views on that.
Yes, well, I have.
Sorry, we can't hear it.
Okay.
If you...
The fees are quite inadequate to run a village, and the residents pay in round figures $100,000 in fees, and it costs 1.3 million to run Lockley. We're way behind the 8 ball. And any rate reduction that we accept, we would have to keep to ourselves.
Good answer. Any more
Yes,
questions?
I've got a question.
Okay, Councillor Miller.
Thank you, and I might just be getting confused here, but you're saying that the retirement village pays the rates, yet the individual residents can claim a rates rebate.
Correct.
So how does that work?
Okay, they get a declaration from their operator which says how much rates they pay, and they sign it to say that this is their income, and they bring it down to the council, looks at the lines DIA has produced, lines, then they get the rates rebate, and you pay that directly into their bank account.
Okay,
So it doesn't go near the village, it all goes to the bank account.
Okay, so they are paying weekly fees that include their ADC rates?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So it's a bit of a circular thing, if you like. So they pay the weekly fee, which includes, I don't know, say $30 a week for the rates component. If they meet the income, that's operated to the council. If the resident qualifies, is able to draw down that from there, and you then pay that directly. So the operator doesn't know who's got what, important for privacy reasons, that's, and the operator doesn't have to try and match up rebates for individual residents in the village.
Councillor Mackay.
Thank you. Yeah. We are told by independent sources inside this district that our rates in comparison are in the lower quartile. So how would we get on if we said that 75% of Zealand is a fairer place for rates than Ashburton? Would you like to comment, sir? Maybe you're already getting the discount.
Well, discounts are certainly by no means universal, I have to. Look, you may well have rates, possibly no doubt to good governance, but no, I couldn't really comment on that. Or the arguments which we've presented to members on the reasons why we believe a rates discount is appropriate.
Councillor.
I'm just sort of struggling, like your Rolls-Royce system, and you look at a rate here, and then we've got developers with rows of flats or apartments who they put the roading in and they service them themselves. So do you think we're going to be opening a can of worms? We're going to have to look at other developments, you know.
Are these flats or are they on your own, you know?
Sure, but you have these other different types of housing. Do you think we're opening a can of worms if we give to one and not the others? And
I guess at the end of the day, it's a matter for council to work out where the boundaries are. We would suggest that in a retirement village, like there's 800 metres of private road. In a conventional flat development, I suspect it would be more like 80 metres, I would suggest. Not a bigger proportion of the land mass is in roading in a conventional housing development. But yes, I mean, I think we've suggested a boundary so far as villages are concerned drawn, but I do appreciate that people, I think Councillor McCain at the point earlier, people can come up and make an argument. That's over to council to weigh the value of it.
Thank you, John, for your presentation. I never thought I'd hear someone 40 minutes talking to houses. You do it well, but thank you for your presentation.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it. Thank you.
On my list are Dan and Kevin. Gentlemen. Okay, yeah, do that. Yeah. Sorry, I put it there. I did.
You start.
Sorry. The pages we're looking at 124, number 8. Under these seats.
Do you want me to start then?
Yeah.
Pages are 1 to 4, number 8. Gentlemen.
Good afternoon, everybody. A good day so far. We won't be talking too long. We won't bore you or get you back on track, hopefully. So we'll start with the Revenue and Finance Policy submission. Kelvin will talk about the development one. Let's go through each point that we've raised in our submission, add a few comments, and Kelvin bits as we go along, just in case I forget anything. So the first bit, elderly housing, was to max it at 20%. From general rates and 10% from fees and charges. And you'll see the note at the bottom, we're saying, doesn't think it should be involved in social housing. Maybe should look at part of it. It's obviously become challenging. In the private sector, they've had to use new legislation, and council's going to run out of money in their pool next time, according to the document. So they need to perhaps look at it in the future. Second one was stock water management policy. We didn't say anything about the different set charges. We thought you might get enough advice from the sector on that one, so we left that one. But we did add that when it goes through urban areas, the urban people shouldn't be charged if they're connected to a urban water supply. There's nothing in the policy to say at the moment. We just thought that was a good note to put in there, and perhaps that could be in the policy in the future. Next one was wastewater. We said the status quo, obviously because it really affects is methane. Come out worse off of the wastewater. When Richard and Tony presented us, they did ask us a question. So the water has gone to like a big pool, and did we feel there was any benefits out of that? And it's like, well, not really as a board, but obviously the change of the government now going through the water and the council getting 9 million, we can see how there is, as a pool, it's the council one pool, so we're probably have a slight mind shift on that one going forward. On that one. Next one was our community grants and funding. We think it should be a 100% UAD charge. The only one to that is the methane pool, which is, it's at the bottom of our submission. If I page. So 3 years ago, when this was re-looked at, decided that was getting double dipped on rates because they were paying for the MEF pool and also for the EA networks, which included the other pools. So it changed, and then it's changed back, and we can't find any reason why that was changed back. Questioning that, and the second thing on that is it's also in the document 11.9 and 11.13 how this charge will be a target rate on Methven people, and as we see it, hidden under the Methven Community Board. The Methven Community Board has nothing to do with the Methven, and we don't think it should be the Methven Community Board and then given back a grant. If it's going to be a 100% target rate of Methven people, it's very transparent. Board now go, oh, how much does it cost to run? We've got hidden charges in there, but we just think that's very unfair on that one. Next one. Cool. Yes, the EA net. There was obviously some confusion in the document about the figures being a little bit wrong way. We actually agree with the current of 60% fees and charges and 40% UAGC. And because of COVID and no one knows what the future holds, but going so broad away, we feel it would be a little bit of user pay system in there, not just on the ratepayers. Obviously, it's going to be a challenge if things are down in the future, then the council to decide. That's sort of how we felt about that one. Yeah. Next one, moving on to Halls and Reserves Board. This I find quite interesting. It used to be 50% general rate, and the move is to go 100% targeted rate, and we feel that is a little bit harsh. And under the Y, it says because a lot of the halls and reserves boards are underfunded, we'd have to agree totally they are underfunded. I mean, they've got volunteers running them. For the volunteers, you know, a whole lot of trouble. Some reserve boards and some halls have income sources, others don't, which is complicated. And because the Methven Reserve Board is the income source apart from funds from the council, and if you're only targeting a small area, say, of the Methven people, which it's down to be, there's a lot of people outside the area that use these facilities, just a small group that's paying. So it's the same with the, it's the same sort of thing. It's inside the town boundary that use it. It's district. And even in the policy it says that it has a community-wide benefit, not a group benefit. A group benefit, yes, there should be a targeted. It doesn't. And the policy document says it's a community-wide benefit. So it should be either a mix or, if that makes sense. What else was there? I think that for that one. And the other one that we had was maps. So Tony's got that just the one map up there at the moment. Oh, Kelvin. So if we just look at the map for a start, it says Methven Reserve and Commercial. Right. We feel it's missing time stream, which is division, and also the hot pools, which is top sort of area of there. I'd see that included in the residential and commercial rates. We go. Oh yeah. Methven Community Board area, and it's missing time stream. With this one, it'll be a bit more challenging because I don't think it can tool representation review. So me on that, but we like time stream included in that as a subdivision of Methven. More.
There's another thing with that though, including time stream, but it negates the people.
Kelvin, can you put your mouth in front of the, yes.
It negates the people on the corner of Mount Hardy Road and Footing Road. If you can see that pointer, you know where time stream is, but Footing Hill Road now going down towards the left and is now going to include, there's a subdivision, a new subdivision going in there, plus other ability to, back down, next to the golf course. So I mean, and Dan's quite correct, we can't do this for 3 years, can we? Or it can't be done for another 3. But it needs to probably take greater thought to that corner of it for the community board representative, because we're sort of hamstrung past the corner of Harding Road, but in actual fact, there's quite a few residents are on putting it, really close to Meth.
Let's go down to the next one.
Oh, gee, 2 jobs.
And the Methven community pool boundary, that one there, it's the same. It's missing time stream, the hot pools or open pools. So we'd like that included in that map. Should be able to be done. If we go down.
I mean, that pool board should be the same as, the pool boundary should be the same as the community. Pretty simple, really.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Can I just
So
ask
we've
a
got a
quick
question.
question?
We've got
Sorry.
a question from Les on.
The pool, the Methven community pool, the users are probably similar to the people who use the domain, the hall. So have you got an idea of what the boundary could be for that? I mean, even including Time Stream and Mount Harding Road, there's still a lot more users than that boundary. So I was just wondering if you had an idea, or is it Western Ward? Is it Mount Somers through to?
That's probably a little bit above our, but after putting some thought into it, you can't draw a line in the sand. So it probably needs to be target rates and percentage of UAGC. It's the only thing I could think of. And if you use that example for all halls and all, it itself out.
And I think that's fair comment, but that certainly needs to be in line with it. And as you can't go 5K diameter radius of Methven, middle of Methven, and say we want that as a community board. So I think getting it right would be the way to go.
We've got a Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you be happy, councillors from the Methven Board, if the community area was the same as what is proposed for waste collection, which includes the stream?
Is that on here?
It's in the map section.
The big difference between the other maps and the Methven Community Board is by the commemoration authority, and it's done in a grid.
Go back.
It's a grid mesh
The
type
green
thing.
one. That's the one.
There.
Is that the one? That's the one. Yeah.
You're talking a waste collection, councillor.
No, sorry, Mr. Chairman. I asked, do you want the community board area to be the same proposed waste area collection plus that of Thyme Street?
Well, that's basically what we've been saying for the last 2 slides, except that you chuck it across the top to get to Time Stream.
So
if we
is
look
the
at the
answer,
other maps,
is the answer yes or no? Answer is yes.
well, the answer is what you want to do. Certainly, it would be in the same area, because
Go on.
is almost the whole area. Why wouldn't it?
Right, if we just go down to the
Next one, please.
wastewater one. Wastewater.
This way.
So the same thing. We think the hot pool should be included in that. Obviously not Time Stream because they're on septic tank. They're not included in that, but the hot pools area should be included in that. They're going to use the sewer, and this is a map of rateable area, and you won't be able to unless on the rateable area. So that's just why we think they should be connected to.
Yeah. Councillor Wilson, got a question.
Yep, thanks, Mr. Chairman. That's there, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Straight across boundary, that would be would it? The sort of square boundary.
One of the other maps you show it goes along, which will be a comment in a minute, along the hedge line and includes the race course, which would be sort of what we're part of that other map. Yeah. Yeah. And just the last thing on while we're looking there, if you just go down a little bit on the map. The other down. Yeah. Cool. There it is. Or that one will do. Where the green boundary goes along on the, which is Holmes's Road, the maps on the website, I can't zoom in to see exactly where that is. What we've got there is a residential area. We've got Holmes's Road. We've got a strip of council land all the way through that is formed a walkway and a flood channel. So I can't exactly where that boundary is. We see the walkway and those trees as part of Methven. It's an important shelter belt as part of Methven. It forms part of Methven, and we'd like to see the map move to the high or the of the council-owned land. That's about all I've got for that one. So if you want to take questions on that,
Just
then go to Cal.
Councillor Wilson? Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Councillor McMillan's just pointing out the shelter belt you talked about.
It would probably be expected that does it go to the edge of the road reserve on the council reserve side or on the side, or would it go through the reserve to the, if you get the drift, there's three different places.
Yeah.
To further that, the reserve land is pretty disgusting here, and it's a lot of cleaning up, and maybe the community could do it if they thought they had a bit of responsibility for it. But at the moment, that's a bit of a shocker, eh? Roadside's not good because council don't do their roadsides, but there's a lot of tree and growth, ugly stuff within that reserve as well.
Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Chair, would it be easy if you dropped a map into us what you think it should be, and something to work from?
You do that because each map will be slightly different,
yeah,
obviously, for each map. Yeah. Yes, we think it should be. Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll be second guessing.
Yeah.
Or remembering.
Yeah.
Of course. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah.
Prester, does council own that trees?
Yeah.
On that walkway?
Yes. Yeah.
It runs through the back of the racecourse and over the ditch, and or it might have changed, but Harding there used to run way along there.
Just the ditch now.
Thank you.
My part of it is to do with the development contributions and I'm sure you've read my good handwriting because you take you that long to learn how to work it. Essentially, I'm on behalf of myself, but also the community board, and we're looking at this, and comment was exactly how the calculation factors are arrived at. I know it's in the draft policy, and it makes you old how many calculations are in there. Some kind guy from the council, or is he? Sent a graphic of it and how to, I couldn't download it. So it's quite big, it's quite, which is fine. I couldn't download it. But I see where it is, and I can see how it's calculated broadly. And calculation, and this policy was done because it hasn't got a date on it, which is a bit. But the feedback was until the 26th of July. So these are based on the fact that nobody knew about 20 million, or indeed nobody knew anything about a possible 2.9, is it, or 3.9, whatever the are. So I guess taking into the probability of one and the possibility of the other, then this calculation would change because the money's not being spent by this community as such. It's for facilities, but sure the parameters of those sums must be external money. So I'm not sure whether it's wrong. I know when this was printed, I got that thing, I could read it, but I couldn't. We could look at it, and it came out exactly the same. So if 20 million for community facilities is whipped away there, surely that 4.8, whatever the figure is going to alter rather markedly. I would have thought
I will ask Hamish to reply.
The money you refer to, Calvin, is essentially just funding. The cost of the services doesn't alter.
But part of the package is the cost of it, not the
The
operating
cost
alone.
hasn't changed.
Yes, but the cost is only part of that calculation because it's the cost.
That hasn't changed.
No, that has. So, I'm a mathematician who suggests we've got 20 mil for nothing. Drop that off the side.
That's not the case. All that's happened or has different source of funding. The cost of services remain the same. Indeed, given the purpose of that funding is to stimulate the economy, Council will shortly turn to what other opportunities are created by that funding rather than it being a saving. Because the impulse from the government is that is one way or another, as opposed to being a windfall benefit to the rate.
And the facilities basically defined as the art gallery and the new building. I'm sorry, I don't accept your argument, Hamish, but that's the same thing applies in theory. If you get the water, and Methven was a shovel-ready program, that's all great, I understand that, but shouldn't that alter some of the Methven development for the future? Because it's going in the big pool, but somebody has the benefit of that 4 million, in my view. It sounds like I'm wrong. I just don't get it. Doesn't seem to be any fairness in it, or fairness of say no fairity.
Kelvin, can I just go to Richard? You stood up before. Can I just ask you if you can explain anything? You might have to use
I find myself with a slightly different understanding of the situation to my chief executive, hence my reference to career limiting. The development contribution for community now document at $441. After going for 20 million of funding from government to come in, so that reduces the rate funded loan for council by $3 million. The impact of development contributions work is council could take the growth part, obviously, so that's for renewal. Form part. Sorry, I'll sit down. Pressure. Actually, I'll cut to the chase. I've done the calculation on the basis of if we get this 20 million, I've allocated it across the cost of the project. I have worked out, we worked out the break and I've about 3-5% of the project growth. So with 7.35 of the odd million instead of 50, it does bring the cost of the development community infrastructure down, but what you need to remember is that we kept the infrastructure development contribution at so that no community had an increase in total development contributions of more than $2,500, and the uncapped development contribution was about $6,900, and with the growth component share of the coming off, the community infrastructure DC is still above 4841. With the cap, it still sits at 4841. anyone happier except for Calvin, not Hamish.
That's a good
So,
Well, he's
and of course, if the council chooses to follow the government's advice, $1 million should be reinvested to support the economy, etc., then it could affect the in any number of different ways depending on projects it was allocated to and how much worth and all of that stuff.
Oh, no, I, with Richard, with that last bit. Secondly, the other assumption that can't yet be made is that the loan, because in fact the bill will be funded by loan and property sales, and it could well be that council continued with exactly the same their loan and chose to sell less property. So I don't think it's a linear thing that says windfall less DCs dramatically. It's straightforward until council has examined how it is to treat the $20 million.
Thank you, Hamish. We go back to the questions. Mr. Mayor.
Just comment on the 20 million and the 3.99. Both are meant to be stimulus packages, not to be and not spent. The wastewater and drinking water one, it's projects forward from year 2, 3 of the long-term plan. Spend it this year, or as best you can this year. So, not to be banked, it's to be spent.
Understood that.
Good.
Yeah.
Before we go back to you. Oh, sorry, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, my understanding that $2 million we're getting from the government does not affect C at all, because basically the cost of the new civic centre is going to be 51 point, whether it's paid by loan funding or whether it's paid by government funding. To join the club, you're still going to be paying your share of $51.2 million, whatever the price is going to be. Will not be brought into account though. Council do not borrow the amount of the 1.4 for the new civic centre, then that's the least borrowings required, and therefore there won't be a charge built into the DFC.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Latham.
Chairman, I'm just wondering whether we're a wee bit off track here. This is for
yes,
tomorrow, I think.
So what is your...
I'm just... Question is, can we get what we're supposed to be doing?
Yes, we do.
I'm sorry to upset the car. There we go. I've got the answers.
No. We've got spare wheels,
there'll be
don't
more
worry.
than 2 people will want those answers long term. So thank you for indulgence, Mr. Chairman. The second part of what I found out was the definition of a non-residential unit. And it says in here on page, doesn't matter if I've got a page, 12, that a non-residential unit that can include dairy shed, sharing sheds, indoor farming facilities, blah, blah. Now, I would think the government contribution on the middle farm over there, or that pig farm, draws development contribution because it comes out of consents for building consents for residences. You can't be banking, you can't be ripping twice. If a guy's going to put up a pig shed or whatever, and he has to put an employment, there's your development contribution. I think non-residential development has got to be really, really looked at, comparing with what the building is. Then you take, to blow my argument, the hot pools. They're not residential. They've got a huge demand on what goes. I think, and another part of it, residential residential is defined as one house equivalent. Well, how does that work, say, on the hot pool? It's not equitable. So, if someone a feasible processing shed and uses a lot of water, but they are supplying, getting for development, for capital, community facility, they've be better balanced with the water usage or whatever they're doing. To me, is too open interpretation, and I think that's a bit frightening.
I think it will discussions tomorrow.
And then the thing, Mr. Chairman, was, and I might be, I've already proved to get my maths wrong. In the methane supply, and I can't, there's presently 165 connections in water, and a growth of 92 to bring it up to 1057. And in the wastewater in Methven, there's presently 1,058 connections, which is about 100 more than water. And you're expecting the waste connection to go up to 1,454 maximum with a growth of 396. So unless I just can't think as to why there'd be that in Methven. Can't get it. If I'm wrong, tell me. That's all I'm after.
It's in your it's in your submission, isn't it?
Yes,
So
it is. No, that's not. I was
sorry.
Later, but yeah. It's talking about connections. It's not talking about anything else. Connections. Thank you.
Councillor Mackay.
Water connection into accommodation, would that be connection? But you need more pans, so there's more connections for wastewater?
I'm talking about. Well, I'm right around connections. I don't keep any handy. It only goes that one point. I would have thought. So, how come it's so different? That's all.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any questions to the two gentlemen on the top end? If not, I don't have anything showing here, so thank you, gentlemen.
Yep. Thank you very much for your
good
time and
discussion.
listening to us. We know it's a pretty important document because it does affect everyone, and you won't get it 100% right. Otherwise, we wouldn't review it every 3 years or so. Changes. So good luck. Thank you.
We will try our best. Thank you. We're far ahead, but we've got Evan sitting here. Would you like to come on while you're here? I'd like to wait.
I'd like your indulgence and like to wait because both in Auckland, the daughter has 3 young green girls of mine. I'm going to give them a lesson of democracy in the region this afternoon at 10 to 3. So I would just seek your indulgence to say that it's okay. We'd like to
That's fine. Yep. No problem.
For that reason.
Yep. No problem. Right, we've got time off then. From about 2. It's got 35 minutes. No, 20. No, the Bill is not here. He's pulled out. Yeah, and William and Karen are not coming either. So I've got Selwyn. We adjourned. early, so we start earlier. So good afternoon again. The next part of the submissions, and the next one coming up is Selwyn Price. Selwyn. We page number 159. 159, thank you. And thank you, Selwyn.
Thank you. I'd first of all like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to my submission, which I take it you have all read.
Yep.
So for those of you who don't know, when I was on council, I chaired the biodiversity working group, and I was also vice chair of service delivery. So the issue of stock water is of particular importance to me, even though it doesn't affect me in my personal capacity. But before that, I just wanted to talk about consultation. Last time I was here sitting at this table, I spoke about consultation as well. There is a distinct lack of trust in the community that Ashburton District Council actually listens to people that come and submit, whether it's written submission or a heard hearing. I recently put a post up on Facebook congratulating the council on the $20 million coming from central government. And last time I looked, which was a couple of days ago, there were close to 500 comments. The vast majority of those comments were saying, what's the point telling the council they don't listen? They have their own agendas. So I think there is that perception out there, and I don't know how you're going to get around it, but I think it's really important that you try to address it. What doesn't help is when you have, as an example, when you have an article in the newspaper with the chairman of this committee making preemptive comments that talk about the public-private partnership that's going to go ahead. Well, that doesn't encourage people to come forward and actually put in their own submissions. That confirms that very generally held view that people have their own agenda and they're not going to listen to Joe Bloggs. Likewise, when you have a council meeting, and I was absolutely shocked to hear people sitting around this table to make comments like, let's charge them as much as we can and then close the stock water system down. Again, preemptive comments which make consultation less genuine, or appear to be a lot less genuine. That also gives the impression very strongly to those of us who know that those councillors haven't read their reports. And talking about reading things, Local Government Act, which is one of the key acts that actually governs how you behave, has very, very, very strongly theme running through it of the 4 well-beings. And those 4 well-beings include social, cultural, environmental, as well as economic factors being taken into account on every decision. Now, what I saw around this table when it came to stock water was purely economic. So I will talk mostly about stock water. I just wanted to say, given those 4 well-beings, it's really important that you consider very carefully what you do with social housing, elderly persons housing. This council has a terrible reputation for demolition by neglect, and the elderly persons housing is no exception to that. And I think it's something else that needs to be addressed quite urgently. There are people in our community, there are many people in our community, not just the elderly, but the elderly in particular who depend on the elderly person's housing. There is a wait list, as I understand it, for it. It's really important that this council provides that social service. And as I said, it's in the Local Government Act. Now, in terms of stock water, when I say it appeared that some councillors hadn't read reports, that there was a policy written a few years ago on the surface water strategy, and there is an ongoing advisory group. But when councillors talk about closing down the stock water system, they don't seem to understand what that stock water system actually does and what it's used for. It is not just for providing water for stock. It is also acts as flooding mitigation, so that when farmers fill in their stock water ditches, they risk flooding their paddocks. It is used for firefighting in some instances, and we had a long discussion around that when we set that policy. And it is a key habitat for biodiversity. In terms of flooding mitigation, you might want to consider Mill Creek. So when you talk about closing down the entire system, you are talking about closing down Mill Creek as well. Mill Creek is one of the main stock water races across this district. What you have done is you have identified that there is a problem, but I don't believe that you've actually come up with the right solution. Charging somebody an increase of close to 700% in an annual fee is not fair and equal, in my view. So those people who were paying $89 are now going to have to pay $600 per year because they happen to have a stock water race running past their small holding is not very fair and equitable. You wouldn't get away with it in any other circumstance. I don't see why you are trying it in this circumstance. To me, what came across from that meeting was the big boys trying to bully the small holders, the small property holders. In fact, what I thought about was Robin Hood. You're trying to do the opposite. So my suggestion in terms of charging people for stock water is that you actually charge according to what the service that they use. Have a uniform rate for all of those who have a stock water drain going past them, because that's their flooding mitigation. But charge them for the service received. Put water meters on them. We do it on houses. Why not do it on stock water races? There are other services that are offered by the council towards those people who use, towards those property owners who use stock water races. You can charge them according to those services. If they don't use them, they don't pay. It's a user pay situation. So that's my suggestion. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Selwyn. Are there any questions from council? Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Selwyn, for your submission. On the stock water charging in biodiversity, biodiversity is what we would all enjoy. So would you recommend we charge that by general rate?
Well, we all benefit from biodiversity across the district, so yes, why not?
Good. And you make, a second question, you make comment in your submission, a farm with a $2 million income can better afford to pay $6,000 than a lifestyle property with a few head of stock can afford to pay $600. Could you tell me how that is?
Well, purely on a per capita basis of income.
What does the lifestyle property earn then? Because you haven't mentioned that.
Most of the lifestyle property owners that I know earn very little. They work on a subsistence basis. They don't make much money off their land. They do it for the lifestyle, hence the lifestyle block.
So the $2 million income then would be a gross income off that farm?
There are many there are farms in this district that have a gross income of $2 million, yes.
And they have lots of costs that come off that and they're left with the bit that's left?
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you for that. Any other councillors? Any questions? Oh, Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Afternoon, Selwyn.
Afternoon, Stuart.
You talked about a meter on water races. It would have to be piped. We couldn't, as far as I know, there's no mechanism to be able to gauge stock water in an open race. As you know, we've got a stock water committee that hopes to put stock water as much as we can through pipes with irrigation companies. Do you not think that the mitigation is, there's an awful lot of irrigation ponds around for bees and birds and biodiversity and stuff like that? The bird population, wading bird population is huge to what it used to be because of these ponds. Do you not think that mitigates closing some of the races?
Closing, excuse me, closing some of them, yes. Not closing all of them, not closing the entire system, the entire network. But when you think about how much biodiversity has actually disappeared, you know, in the low part of this district, more than 99.5% of biodiversity has disappeared altogether. This is actually an opportunity to build it back up again. But I'm thinking about the likes of eels and other creatures like that. So some of them will live in ponds, but many of them don't either.
Any other questions? Just one reply from me, Selvin. What was in the paper was done by a reporter. It was not really what I said. It was personal. So that's what it is.
Well, that's fine, but I mean, we all know how newspapers operate.
Yes. So I could get cross, but that's how it goes. So Selwyn, thank you for your submissions. We certainly take it aboard. We had quite a variety over the whole day, to be honest, in favour or against. It was quite amazing. And we certainly will deliberate tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you
very much.
Rod, you still got 10 minutes, so that's fine. We're waiting for your family.
So I can have around 10 minutes rather than...
Oh, you can, whatever you like. $21.
It's like coming back, really, in some shape or form.
So is your family...
I've resurrected myself with it.
Yeah. Rod, is your family online or not? Not yet.
Sorry?
Is your family online already or not?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay. But no, we are in front of it before
Well,
you.
if you indulge and give us an extra 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
I'm tuned in for 250 with them.
Yep, that's okay. Yep.
No, they're taking it at home at Pukekohe and Auckland.